At 50% you'll have a very large waistline, and at 40% you'll have a slightly smaller waistline but still no visible abs. At 30% you get to a point where you start to see that your stomach is getting flat but still a little bit off from having those visible abs. The visible abs come at 20%. The lower you get from there, the closer you get to 10%, the more your abs will show, to the point where at 10% you will have a very nice, well-defined six-pack. And between this 20 to 10%, this is going to be the point where most people, the average person, will see this as the most ideal physique. Now, very dedicated, competitive people, they often prefer something below 10%, but if you ask average Joe in the street what their ideal body type will be, it will be something between 12 to 10%. Now, when you get to 6%, this is the point where you will be competition ready. This is the point where elite bodybuilders, natural or not, get to in order to compete for trophies. And to know what a 6% physique looks like, look at these pictures of myself in my late teens, where I would often push myself to get below 10% body fat to something that is here 6 to 7%, and you will be absolutely diced. But it's not really a fun place to be, and I will tell you in the video exactly why. So the optimal six-pack zone for most people will be between 10 to 20% body fat for men, and for women it will be somewhere between 18 to 28%. This is kind of the balance between having the most aesthetics while still living a healthy, nice life where your life will not be as interesting as a wet sock, basically. And this is me right now at 10% body fat. Some people will have more of a 4-pack at this point instead of a really full 6-pack, and that will be mostly down to the genetic makeup of that individual person and their abs. But in this video I will tell you exactly how you can, regardless of your genetic makeup, still get to diced, lean, good looking 6-pack abs. So I'm going to explain you how you can get to diced, lean 6-pack abs regarding 3 scientific methods and tools. First, I'm going to tell you how you need to train optimally to make those abs pop. And then second, we're gonna get to how you need to set up your nutrition to lose fat at the right rate, and exactly how you need to set up your macros and calories as well, and track for the right adjustments along the way to get you to this situation when it comes to nutrition. And third, I'm gonna give some general recommendations on supplements that I would use and I would highly recommend that are as well going to actually be worth your buck, because most of them out there really aren't. First, let's talk about ab training. There's this general myth within the fitness industry that regardless of how much you train your abs, you will never be able to see them unless you diet down to a certain point, which to some extent I agree with, but to some extent I don't either. Imagine saying, I'm not going to train my biceps because if I don't get lean enough, you will not see their definition. No one says that, and the same accounts for abs. You want to train your abs just like any other muscle group. The point is you need to train them so that when you get lower, when you get to a lower body fat percentage, you actually start to see them sooner and make them pop more. If you build them up through proper hypertrophy training, they will pop more and sooner, just like any other muscle group. The problem with most ab training online is that many fitness influencers that you will see will tell you and try to sell you this fast, almost circuit-like calorie burning ab training method that actually doesn't do much. This truly really is a waste of time. You do need to train your muscle like any other muscle, which is by using weights and applying progressive overload and making sure that you at least train 2 reps short of failure. Because this kind of workouts don't get your abs to a point where there's enough stimulus for actual muscle growth to occur because you're not training close enough to failure, it actually is a real waste of time and just another form of cardio. Yes, you will burn a few hundred extra more calories, but you will not be able to build up a solid 6-pack. In order to do that, you need to train them like any other muscle group, which means that you need to load the muscle with actual weight. And to build your abs, you actually only need 2 exercises. First one being either a plate loaded or cable weight loaded crunch. So you need to apply weights and resistance. What I would do, and what I always actually do, is I use weighted crunches with a cable, and all you'll actually ever need to do is just 3 sets per week of 10 to 12 reps twice per week. So 3 sets in one session and 3 sets in another session. And you need to train at least 2 reps short from failure, meaning you need to keep your form nice and controlled, not allowing you to perform a full rep at the end anymore with perfect technique. With good control, with this intensity, you will start to grow your abs. These will hit the full six pack, but they will mostly emphasize more of the top 4 abs. And in order to compensate for that, we can do hanging leg raises, which can be either literally hanging from the pull-up station, so to speak, or you could do them using a Roman chair, which is what I prefer, because the Roman chair will allow back support, which will allow you to not use any momentum in the swinging and get everything through the abs. So what that means is the abs will be more of the limiting factor within the movement, which will allow for better quality and output. And by doing these leg raises, you will focus more on the lower abs. So then you have an exercise that is more upper abs biased and an exercise that is going to be more lower abs biased. Then you have the best combination. And as well for the Roman chair one, 3 sets per training session, twice per week, doing 10 to 20 sets as well. If you can't do straight leg raises yet, what I would recommend you to do is to do a hanging knee raise, because it's slightly easier and a nicer entry level. Do 3 sets of 10 to 20 reps twice per week as well, until you get to the point where you can do them with straight legs. Once you get to the point where you're doing them straight legs and that becomes too easy, you hit 3 sets of 20 nice and controlled easily, you can start incorporating ankle bands, for example, like ankle weights to give some more additional resistance. Or you just control the negative part of the motion, the eccentric part, with more control. But you gotta apply some sort of progressive overload. And how I would go about this when you're starting out, just work your way up from 10 reps per session. Try to add 1 rep every training session or every week at least, and work your way up weekly until you get to a point where you can do 20 reps per set in a total of 3 sets, and then you start to apply adding weight. You could add planks and anti-rotation movements as well, but I would say they're not necessary, more of an optional thing. They are great for overall general core strength and stability, but they are not very effective when it comes to building abs. If you want to develop a six-pack, you need to train them with weights and apply progressive overload. So this is going to be your full six-pack training plan. You're going to train them twice per week, both weighted crunches and leg raises, doing a combined sets per session twice per week. So one day, for example, on Monday, you'll do the crunches with weight along with the leg raises, 3 sets each, combined total of 6. And then, for example, on Thursday, you'll do it again. So you have 2 exercises, 3 sets per session each, 6 per session total, 12 per week in total. And you can do it on any other day, as long as you ideally don't do it back to back. So not like Monday to Tuesday, but just somewhere where you would say at the beginning of a week and somewhere at the mid to end of the week. Something like that. Can be Monday and Thursday, can be Tuesday and Friday, whatever you want. It would be smart to incorporate some sort of cardio, even though it's not really necessary for fat loss. It can help maintain a smaller waist overall and improve calorie balance. And as well, science has shown that people who incorporate some activity tend to keep the weight off longer in the long run as well. So other than that, you do have some additional calories to eat, which can help with a bit of anabolism. So it's always a good thing to stay active and do some sort of cardio. Just don't try to make cardio the driving force for fat loss, because you can't out-train a bad diet. And I would recommend doing 2 to 5 cardio sessions of 30 minutes per week. However, keep the intensity low to moderate and try not to exceed a total of 3 hours of cardio per week. But if you split it up this way, it will likely be fine. But the reality is, you can do the most optimal training and cardio training plan, but if your diet is not in place, you will not reach your six-pack. You will not get lean enough without the part of nutrition. So next up, let's set up your six-pack diet plan. To give you the most effective and simple method on the planet, look up the Catch and McArdle formula on Google. Pretty plain and simple. Just fill out your stats and it will give you something to go with from the beginning. Now ideally, After this initial starting point, you want to track data. All this mathematical stuff is to get you to a starting point that is going to be as close as possible to the actual point that you should be at. So use this formula, see what comes out. It should be somewhere between 1500 to 2500 calories. Then what I want you to do after that is I want you to track your weight every single day. Now, if you miss a day, it's not going to be bad. It's more like one weekly average of your weight is going to say much more about your actual body weight than a single entry. Let's compare it to, let's say you have a restaurant and you would want to know how your restaurant is performing. Would you rather compare the weekly totals or monthly totals and then draw conclusions from that and how it's performing, instead of maybe looking what a single guy paid at one table? That's a bit how this goes too. One single weight entry doesn't say a lot about your actual body weight. A weekly average is a much more valuable point. So what you want to do is you want to get as much points as possible. So 7 is going to be better than 5. 5 is going to be better than 3, but just get a weekly average and compare it with the week before. What you want to be aiming for is a drop between 500 grams to 1 kilo per week. So that's going to be something between 1 to 2 pounds of weight drop per week. To make it even easier, let's say 500 grams, right? So half a kilo a week. 500 grams of weight loss per week is done by a 500 calorie deficit per day. 500 deficit per day, 500 grams of fat loss per week. If it's 400 grams of fat loss per week, that also meant that you were in a 400 calorie deficit per day. 300 fat loss per week is 300 calorie deficit per day. That's pretty plain and simple, right? And you want to aim somewhere between 500 grams fat loss per week to 1 kg. Now, really just go based off of this. Some might say it's not good to go based off of weight only, because you'll also gain some muscle mass in the process. But realistically speaking, you will not gain more than 200 grams of muscle mass per week. And I like to keep things as simple as possible, because adherence is the most important thing when it comes to this. 1% better every day is 365 per week. That's going to be amazing. That's how this fitness game works. So try to keep it simple. Regardless of the weight that you might gain from building muscle mass, still try to aim for 500 grams of fat loss per week. Let's say you gain 200 grams of muscle, then it means you still lost actually 700 grams of fat, right? So let's say you had 200 grams of muscle gain, but your total weekly average compared to the week before dropped by 500 grams, and you had 200 grams of additional muscle gain. That means for that total to be minus 500, you actually lost 700 grams of fat, which is still fine, because you want to drop somewhere between 1000 grams, so 1 kilo, to 500 grams per week. So just keep it simple, aim for that 500 gram to 1 kilo drop weekly. Now when it comes to macros, proteins are going to be the priority. Even for individuals who don't train, science has shown that if you have a protein-rich diet, you will lose more body fat when compared to eating a lower protein diet. Now all you need to do is hit 1.8 grams of protein per kg of body weight. If you prefer to go higher, you can do that, but it's not necessary. I would opt for taking those extra proteins that you otherwise would eat and just put them into fats and carbs. So you can have nice synergy between all of those and get the best results. When it comes to fats, a minimum of 40 grams per day. 1 gram seems to be optimal, but you can go as low as 50 grams, especially deeper into the cut. That might be easier to stick to, since fats have 9 calories per gram and proteins and carbs have 4. Proteins actually 3.8, but you can round it off to 4. So that's double the calories per gram when it comes to fats. So when you get leaner and leaner, you'll likely be better off moving more towards 50 grams of fats per day. Now the remaining calories are going to be carbs, but prioritize whole foods. If you can do it, you can basically eat 20% of your daily calories as processed foods, but only if you hit those proteins and do not exceed the total daily calories. But the leaner you get, the more you want to prioritize on eating whole foods and eating satiety-rich meals, so meals that really fill you up. Now there are a few diet mistakes we should cover as well, and first one being is cutting too fast. If you cut too fast, you will sacrifice muscle loss. Your body technically doesn't want to hold on to that amount of muscle. It just wants to survive, and all the excess unnecessary amount of muscle you have, it kind of wants to burn first. But by proper training and recovery, you can prevent this. But when you go too fast, you will guaranteed lose unnecessary muscle, which is muscle loss and less fat loss. That's absolutely not what we need. And it becomes harder to stick to your diet. You're much more likely to rebound and get into this kind of yo-yo situation. I often like to say that trying to go twice as fast makes it 4 times as hard mentally, with fewer results and less retained muscle to show for at the end. So for sustainable fat loss, you want to lose between 0.5 to 1% of your body weight per week. So if you currently weigh 200 pounds, around 90 kg, try to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. And if you have a lot of weight to lose, you can cut actually for longer than 3 months straight. I would recommend you to take a 2-week diet break after 20 weeks, in which you will go for maintenance calories for approximately 2 weeks, and then you can continue again based on how you did before in the same deficit for another 20 weeks until you reach your desired goal. Now, if you don't experience any diet fatigue after 20 weeks, you could basically carry on with your cut until you get to that point. And when do you know when you experience serious diet fatigue? That's basically when you notice energy is extremely low and all you can think about is food. Like literally, if you're like willing to cook 4 hours for a single meal, then you know you're having some serious diet fatigue, or you're just getting too lean. But you gotta observe objectively. Don't use this as an excuse for you to just get back to maintenance, because we wanna reach our goals. Another common mistake is setting somewhat of a too unrealistic, too lean end goal. Once you get to about 6 to 8% for males and about 18 to 10% for women, you will start to experience serious low energy and extreme hunger and reduced libido as well. It's okay to get there for a few weeks, but just don't try to stay there for a long time, since this lean is simply not sustainable and not healthy. I'd like to say that 10% for men is kind of the sweet spot. That's the lowest you can get without having to give in on your quality of life and still keep a healthy body without basically making your life as interesting as a wet sock. Because there's more to life than just having big biceps and ripped abs. You want to ideally have it all, at least in all metrics of life, score at least a 7 or higher. Now let's cover supplements. Supplements that actually work. So first one being protein powder. It just helps with protein intake, so the leaner you get, the higher the percentage of your total daily calories is going to come from protein, unless you can get it from a byproduct of other things. So if you struggle to get the proteins in, the 1.8 grams per kg body weight, you could use something as whey protein to supplement hit those targets. Second one being creatine monohydrate, the most researched supplement on the planet. Taking 3 to 5 grams per day will have overall health benefits and something without side effects that you can take for the rest of your life. It's mentally going to help with better mood regulation, more concentration span, and increased concentration intensity, as well as getting more size and strength. However, there are 25% of people that seem to be non-responders, so just check for yourself if it works for you. Now, third one being caffeine. Caffeine boosts literally focus and energy, so when you use it strategically and time it around your workouts, you can actually get a big energy spike from this and help and supply progressive overload and muscle growth in the process of cutting, and actually at the bare minimum reduce muscle and strength loss. Caffeine seems to have a small thermogenic effect as well, meaning that literally your heart rate goes up slightly, so you burn some more calories, but it hasn't really scientifically shown to help with fat loss. But just use it as a term or way to have increased focus and concentration for your workouts, to just smash it at times where energy might be a bit lower. Now, if you want to have all the handwork and calculations done for, what you could do is you could use my app. You can subscribe to it through the link in the bio, and the app will set up your calories totally by itself, divide them fully optimally over the desired meal moments that you want to have, and then you can choose from 70 plus recipes per eating moment that are all scaled to your macros with an automatic grocery list, etc. Measure it in tablespoons so you don't need to weigh, so you can literally just sit on the couch, scroll through with your entire family, for example, and choose what you would like. But I will have to set this up for you because I want to make sure that when you use this app, you're gonna reap the best benefits from it and you don't make any mistakes. Alright? So basically you could see this as a digital cookbook for kind of normal people with burgers and fries and all these things in it that are basically set up fully optimal when it comes to macronutrients as a bodybuilder would. So you could basically reach bodybuilding like insane goals while still being natural, obviously, while still being able to have a normal life and eat flexible, enjoyable food. And as a final reminder, guys, you have to stay consistent and apply progressive overload. Consistency is key. The fitness game is a marathon, not a sprint. It's a kind of rent you should always be able to pay, and you can only do that if the route you take on is something you can keep on forever. So you need to find something that is consistent and always apply progressive overload when training. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Leave some comments and I'll see you in the next video. And don't forget, guys, it's not about the size of the car, but the size of the arm hanging out of the window. Stay large and in charge.